Hello, welcome to a new episode of Stories You Wouldn't Have Heard Otherwise. Life has changed a lot over the past 500 years. Today, we know that the earth revolves around the sun, birds are real, and that the earth is flat. God, I work really,
A lot
really
of
hard.
people work really hard for their dreams, but it's not meant for everybody.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the tragic story of a visionary. He had a vision that would later become the paradigm shift. But during his time, he was disgraced and persecuted for the very same idea. And here we are talking about tens of thousands of hours of hard work spanning over 3 decades. An incredible vision, an imperishable perseverance, all just to prove that the earth revolved around the sun and not the other way around. You all have heard his name. You just didn't know he had a very tough life. Nicolaus Copernicus, the man who refuted the geocentric worldview and proposed the heliocentric worldview. He was an astronomer, but he never had access to a telescope because telescope was invented only decades after his sad and untimely demise. But that would never bother him because he had far more significant problems to tackle. People. The people of power who saw his work as blasphemy. Because you see, in the 16th century, heliocentric worldview was seen as mortal sin. But none of that would stop him. Such was the passion, the desire, the doggedness that fueled this guy. For the first 27 years of his 30-year-long career, his pen never stopped working, his hands never stopped writing. When you're willing to go to any lengths to prove your point, it is a given that there will be light at the end of the tunnel. His hard work did pay off, he was getting results. But as they say, man proposes, God disposes. What that should have been one of the greatest success stories ever ended tragically being one of the most disturbing failures in science. The world had always believed that the sun revolved around the earth and that the earth was at the center of the universe. Now you see, this is a theory that goes hands in hands with their beliefs. They satisfied their ego and they were more than happy to believe that they were at the center of the universe and hence closest to the God. As the famous English poet Thomas Gray said, "Where ignorance is bliss, it's folly to be wise." In a world that was blinded and guided by just emotions, truth and facts had very little space. That perhaps was the reason why after investing 27 years into it, Copernicus still decided to quit. Well, it's very hard to blame him, because if you think about it, there isn't much a person can do when the whole world mocks him and no one supports. They called him a fool who went against the Holy Writ. Well, it's only fair that he decides to quit. Just for the record, the 27-year-long struggle did take a toll on him. He spent a lot of time worrying about what other astronomers would think of him, what his future would look like, what the Catholic Church would do, and of course he feared death at the hands of the church. Not to mention, during those times, the ones who stood against religion were maimed and stoned to death. You see, 500 years ago, nobody had the luxury to disgrace God. It was all piling up, and that was why in 1539, Copernicus finally decided to quit. Well, he didn't. Because you see, fighters don't quit. That's what made them fighters. That's what made them heroes. And Copernicus was definitely worthy of that title. One day, Copernicus receives a very unlikely visitor, a 24-year-old mathematician named Rheticus who had traveled quite a long distance just so that he could meet his idol. For a 66-year-old Copernicus, Rheticus' presence instilled a new sense of desire and new hopes in him. He had nothing to lose until then, but now he has a reason to resume the project. So he goes back to the observatory, but this time he has the wisdom and support of a young man. By the year 1541, Copernicus had finished writing the manuscript for On the Revolutions of the Celestial Spheres. Rheticus was honored when Copernicus, who was ill at the time, requested him to take the manuscript to the publisher in Nuremberg, which he did, obviously. Rheticus' initial plan was to stay in Nuremberg and supervise the publishing process until the work is done. But since the publishing process took about 2 years to finish and he was wanted at his native place in that period, he had to leave. Now Rheticus, before leaving, hands over the task of supervising the project to a clergyman named Osiander, who might have been an acquaintance of Copernicus. Now let's say for the time being that Osiander did his job very well. Now fast forward to the year 1543. The book that was expected to turn the world upside down is now completed. And here begins Copernicus' tragedy. The drama that unraveled afterwards. No one on planet Earth could have ever been prepared to handle something like that. And when the book finally arrived, Copernicus was on his deathbed. He had lost consciousness, but for that one day, miraculously, he regained consciousness. I know, this is so filmy, so melodramatic to be true. I get it. But hey, I wasn't alive. I wasn't born in 1543? Well, all I have as reference is the books. I have no reason to not believe this. So let's give it the benefit of the doubt. In fact, let's trust it. It's true. Now the book reaches our hero, Copernicus. He gets up, he sits on his bed, he opens the book, he begins to read his book. This is the day that he has been waiting for, and it's been over 3 decades. He starts reading his book. He finishes reading it, and then he keeps the book by his side, he closes it, and he lies down on his bed. But then he never woke up again. And you'll be thinking, how on earth is this a tragedy? Yeah, he had a very tough life, but at the end, he had a happy ending after all, right? At the end, everything came fine. But the simple answer should be, no. You see, there is something else that we all overlooked. The publishing was supervised neither by Copernicus nor by Rheticus. In the original manuscript, Copernicus had taken a very bold stand against the church and the critics. A persecution was imminent. Osiander, in good interest, made a few corrections without Copernicus' or Rheticus' knowledge to dilute the emotions involved in order to help Copernicus. But this completely negated the purpose of the book. Osiander only added a couple of lines to it, but that completely misinterpreted the entire purpose of the book. So the book went from, trust me, this is true, the earth revolves around the sun and not the other way around. Trust me, here is the proof, to, come on, this is just my opinion, you don't have to take this seriously. Osiander, in good interest, ruined Copernicus' life. No one read the book. No one ever heard of Copernicus for about another 100 years. Now the only person who could save Copernicus was Rheticus. But he never returned back. He never would interfere even once in this matter. Why would that be so? Copernicus had acknowledged Rheticus' contribution, as it should be. But Osiander feared that since Rheticus is a Protestant, the Catholic Church would not be happy with this. Without Copernicus' consent, erased Rheticus' name. In fact, he not only erased, but added the Pope and a lot of other people just to please the Catholic Church. Now Rheticus read the book and he was legitimately upset and he felt betrayed by his own idol. So he would never come for the rescue of the book. So the book had an untimely death just like Copernicus. No one read it, no one heard about it, no one would hear about this book for about 100 years. Soon after his death, Copernicus was completely forgotten. And so was on the revolutions of the celestial spheres.